So middle of the chapter 299. I'll read quickly from the beginning. Briefly, he's going to be talking about the third and fourth types of dysfunctionality, of imbalance between air and keli. So V'hamadrega Gimel, page Tofrei page 605. V'hamadrega Gimel, the third level, Hi Hamadrega Yesh Gerua. This is the lowest, this is the worst possible scenario, the worst possible level. Who, and that is Sha'eru B'chinas Ma'ayim L'yesh, B'yeser, B'tekef Heizgal, so B'tekef Hayeshes B'yeser. The air has manifested from Ayin to yesh with overabundant intensity and revelation, and an overabundant and excessive yeshes, excessive coarseness. I mean, he's just describing it, then he'll explain what it means. V'hakeli ein ba b'chinas bitl hayesh klal, and the container has no bitl hayesh at all. Has not at all been sublimated. So in the example, let's say, of the wick, we talked about where the wick is not a wick, it's not a container to the energy, to the flame. They don't connect. Then we talked about a wick that gets porous. It's so porous, it loses its personality. It's not, and that's not a keli. It's too much ayin. And now he's going the other extreme.
So when it's like
where the container is a complete yesh, and the air also has now been trapped in that state of too much yesh.
When it's saying the or is ma'ayin yesh, I mean, why you have to?
No, because that's the language has been using in all this whole mamarim, that for the energy and container to meet, the container has to go from yesh to ayin, and the air has to go from ayin to yesh. That's what he means. It doesn't mean yesh ma'ayin as in, he's talking more from a state of sublime to a more yesh state. Mm-hmm. That's the language. Okay. Valkain, and since the keli has no bitla yesh at all, it's not changed in any way. It's not in any way been more prepared to receive the energy. So the keli adds even more power to draw down the energy into more yesh. So we have here two things going on. The air is too much yesh. The keli is only yesh and there's no bitl at all. And thus, therefore, it's making the air even more yesh than it would be on its own. So the whole thing is a mess. Any way you twist it. The yesh leimer, and we can say the yeshus ha'er mitzadatzu m'kol mokim madregas ha'kedusha. The fact that the air has come down to being too much yesh, it's still in kedusha. It was like I gave the example of a teacher whose intention is good. He wants to teach the student, but the student happens to be no keli. So the teacher will get trapped there, like the drowning victim, like the lifeguard who's being schlepped down by the person who's drowning. But the teacher is still Kedusha. Yes, the air has gone too far, but it's still in the level of Kedusha. And what does the container add? That the yeshes of the container, the yeshes of the container schleps it and brings it to a place of opposite of Kedusha, which already then, now we're talking no longer Kedusha. Then it's actually drowning. It's actually destructive. Sha'az, that's the parentheses. Then you go, Sha'az zevez ageidim yachdov. And then, when you have this situation, this is the scenario. The air is too much yesh. The keli is no bitla yesh. So then, each one, zevez ageidim yachdov, each one is contributing, and together, yeh mechuvonim, the b'chinas yesh gomer v'niflet legamer madreget achteina b'yeser. So both of them are now contributing toward one direction, which is basically spiraling out of control to a point of yesh gomer v'niflet, complete yesh, meaning completely into its own identity, losing sight of its purpose, its kavanah, of God, and so on. V'niflet legamri, completely separate, the madreget achteina b'yeser, a very low level. Then he gives the dugma in the parentheses. You could say an example for this is like the first tablets that were given with a great fanfare, a lot of rash with great sounds, not a noise. But b'chinas is galus yiseda, in a way of manifested in a way of abundant, excessive but not excessive, abundant revelation. This was Matan Torah at Sinai. V'sholta b'hem ayin hara. And a sholta would mean, sholta usually means shlita is like governing, but here means sholta b'hem, that manifest in them. How would you translate sholta b'hem? Like it's descended upon them an ayin hara as a result. Now, all this noise, we say sometimes, for example, you don't count people because you don't want to make obvious a blessing. You don't count people. You say asher yesh, whatever. Or fish are blessed. You say it would be like the fish of the sea because fish are stavar samim min ha'ayin. They're concealed. When things are revealed, people looking, you have the evil eye, so to speak. We don't believe in ayin hara, the evil physical eye, but the idea that you don't have to be boilet. You don't have to be blatantly. Because then always according to Chassidus, the expression would be the tzadcha keneged. God created zela umazeh. So when it sees success, it says, "Oh, does you really deserve the success?" You take too much attention. You get too much attention. You also get the attention of the other forces that come to challenge the situation.
So how does it fit in with the scenario that we have here?
So actually here, so it says this is not the chiddush of the Rashab. It says in Gemara, Medrash, and Rashi brings it, that the reason the second luchos were given silently, because the first luchos were given this whole, it was kedusha. I mean, it was a lot of kedusha, but it was done very openly, and it caused a type of like two things. It caused the negative energies to also awaken. Oh, we're also here, and do they deserve it? And it also created in people a certain taking for granted. So it opened up the possibility for the erev Rav, like he's going to explain, to build a golden calf.
So the keli here in the luchos, the keli was
the keli is the erev Rav at the end of the day. One second, the environment that yesh should manifest was the big noises and fanfare. That was like it created an environment. Let me read. Like he says. So let's put it this way.
I think the or was we know that the luchos, and then so.
Well, he says. Let me read and then I'll explain it. The erev Rav, the mixed multitude, who came out of Egypt with them, who were troublemakers, who they yesh gomer, they're complete yesh, they're into themselves. Asur they built the golden calf. Like it says, the Am, the nation saw. What did they see? They saw this whole noise. They saw this whole wherever it says Ha'am, the nation, it's referring to this mixed multitude, the erev Rav. The Neshamas Yisrael begins bittul betzem. The Neshamas Yisrael are fundamentally a state of bittul, like the erev. Aval ha'erev Rav, she'ibchinis yesh gomer u'betekef, the erev Rav who are a yesh gomer into themselves, and betekef, and intensely, betekef is galus, an intense revelation, intense expression, heridu se'er b'yeser. They drew down the energy excessively in this context. In other words, let's take the scenario here. Specifically, you could say a few things. Matan Torah is a gilu erev for sure. That's a given. Mm-hmm. It was one of maybe the biggest revelation in history. It happened and it was done with a ganze trask. Like erev was without any limits. You had kelis of rokim and shefer and everything. Okay. As a result, you think everything was great, but in this world, there's the yesh, and the yesh was there too. Mm-hmm. And when the yesh, so to speak, saw the party, a lot of noise, and the noise of Matan Torah was kedusha, like he says, but it left room for someone to abuse it. Mm-hmm. When you do something silently, like Yom Kippur, there's humility. Matan Torah was, I wouldn't say arrogant kedusha, but it was loud kedusha. So loud kedusha created an environment where the yesh came in, and they were also now, they felt confident, felt powerful, and they ended up abusing the whole situation and taking the bittul of Matan Torah, the gili of Matan Torah, and the bittul of Neshamas Yisrael. And so basically, they're the kelim. Erev Rav here is the keli, a distorted keli, obviously, a yesh, that schlepped the whole erev of Matan Torah and the erev of Neshamas Yisrael, and their bittul into the lowest possible place. Remember, Chet HaEgel came out of it was an aggressive act. It wasn't a small little sin. It came out of like a whole plan. we're going to replace Moshe Rabbeinu or whatever it is. So this is just giving you an example of a scenario. One scenario. I would say it's also because the air was so begili. The air was so begili, it was almost like invulnerable. It felt like nothing could happen. When you're like that, that's when the Ayin Hara settles in.
So
I think it's a combination of the environment. Like you could ask, I understand what you're saying. You're saying, what happens if he wouldn't say anything about the noise and the Ayin Hara? Just say the erev Rav was there. The yesh caused the egel. But I guess he's adding because that adds to that the air was
the environment.
It would be like a teacher who's very excited to come to a student. I'm coming to teach. He's excited and he comes and comes. And the student is not a keli. And the student, instead of taking it the right way, he abuses the excitement of the teacher and then creates the worst problem. The teacher says, "Oh, let me save this person." So that's what I'm.
Yeah,
that's the scenario. That's more or less the way I would explain.
Just if I can make a quick comment, the really not the or causes that, but rather is the yeshut of the keli, correct?
Well,
that causes the problem.
Oh no, but he's saying both in a way. If the was not, he said in the parentheses before that the yeshes of the is only in Kedusha.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be like the noise of Matan Torah. That's yeshes, but it's Kedusha. But it leaves room for a problem. If we're living in the world of Mashiach, it's not like what's said by Koil Kala. Why is Manazes the Koil Chosin, but the Koil Kala is quiet. But it says the Alter Rebbe writes when Mashiach will come, will be Koil Chosin but Koil Kala. Because in a world where there's klippas, a Koil Kala can be abused. So you have to have a certain humility. That's what I would say. So it's a combination of both. If there was no Matan Torah, the erev Rav wouldn't have what to. Unika Sechetzenim, Chassidus explains, is always with his power. There's power, then the Chetzenim come. If there's no power, they don't come. So wherever there's why dam hu nefesh? Why we don't eat blood? Because blood is life. It's a lot of kedusha there. When there's a lot of kedusha, you have to be very careful. It's like, God forbid, when you do surgery and you open up the internal organs, the bacteria come then. So you need more care. Kodesh Kadoshim, when there's a lot of intensity, you always need a lot more care because all the other sides are going to come to get their energy.
Mm-hmm.
When there's no, what do they call them? Bacteria and we say, they don't go where it's arid, they go where there's moisture. Where you find moisture, you're going to find, darkness and moisture is where they thrive. There's no moisture, there's no life force. What did it say? Maggots and stuff don't come. That's why it says, for example, the body of a Jew is matama, God forbid, after death. Because there's a lot of kedusha there. So all the forces of Tumah come to gather. Tumah always comes where there's a lot of kedusha. That's the bottom line. There's a lot of tara. It's another example, actually, for this. That Tumah comes when there's a lot of tara, a lot of kedusha, because that's where they want to get they want to get kreiches. They don't go where there's little kedusha.
Mm-hmm.
And like the nefilim, like the fallen ones. And nefilim hayu ba'aretz at the end of Pasha Bereshis, like the fallen ones that were in the land. As we explained, this is referring to those energies, those angels that basically were complaining and saying, "Look how bad the people are." So God threw them down. So what is it, beruchis? What's this level? So nefilim, by name, you already see that it means something like shviras hakeli, because the breaking, the shattering of the containers caused them to fall. The sheresh and nefilim hum b'chinas hateyu. The root of the nefilim is from the level of teyu. Shenikra anshe shem, men of name, meaning men of recognition. People who wanted a name. B'chinas shem ban shenafal b'shviras hakeli. It's referring to the shem ban. That shame is referring to the shem ban. As we spoke, ban is a gematria behema, a lot of intense energy. There's intensity there. Shem ban that fell down with the shattering of the containers. Va'inyanhu. And here's where we stopped last time, so I'll elaborate more now. Va'inyanhu that a pach nitzutzis shenoflo he nitzutze er. When we talk about the shattering of the containers, this I explained already. Merachefes. Merachefes is rapach mes. The death and the breaking and the shattering of the containers. So it scattered 288 divine sparks. Shenoflu henetzutzer. You're saying the tzutzes, not speaking about containers, you're speaking about the energy. The energy fell and descended. These are sparks of energy, netzutzer, sparks of light. And seemingly, the breakage, the shattering was in the containers. So think of it like this. Here's the energy inside the container shatters. So the energy goes back like a wick. Where's the energy go? The energy doesn't go down. Mm-hmm. The energy goes back up. It expires. It's basically a klotzkash. So what does it mean, sparks of light? In other words, suggesting that not only the container is shattered, but also the sparks descended all over the place. I mean, in the mashal, seemingly, or the way we would understand is that the sparks just go back to their source, and as the containers then fall.
So there are no more sparks. That's what he's saying.
Right. I mean, not manifest. Yeah, they go back to whatever. No more sparks in any practical way. I mean, this is important. Okay, but so let's continue. But mavur, in other places it explains. That since the energy was manifest in the container, in other words, not like in the mashal. In the mashal, the wick, let's say, I'm just giving you an example, the wick doesn't work, so the flame just expires. But here, because the energy was in the container, remember we're talking ruchni, so even when it shattered, it still remained. Something remains there. It doesn't remain in a complete way. Mm. So it's not just that the energy disappeared. It remains. He's saying that's explained elsewhere. Like that. He's explaining, when we say that the result of Shrius HaKelim is this chaotic world. It means that, we don't have an order here, but we know there's Gedusha everywhere. When we eat a piece of food, we're elevating the netzutzes, but they're not organized. They're not like lying in the A, B, C, D. They're all over the place, so to speak. So he's saying that not only the containers, but also the energy. I mean, let's continue to finish because he's obviously leading somewhere. If you remember, look at the last page, the bottom of Tafresh Dalad, he spoke of the abir of Rosh Hamatas. So if you remember, he said that the clay b'shvirasa, that when the container breaks, it's the ultimate yeshes. Whereas even when it's still a container, before it broke, it was not that yesh. So he's referring to that same Likutei Torah now. So the same Likutei Torah is saying that something remains. But that's not the explanation he wants to give here. In other words, he answered the question, but from elsewhere. He wants to go back now and say something different. Okay? So bottom line, the first explanation, what he just said here, is another place it explains what's in Tzutze, what are the sparks? Because since the energy was in the container, so after it shattered, the sparks remained. So there are sparks also down, have also descended. However, according to what we're explaining here, in this mimer here, in this discourse, that the air did not grasp the container. In other words, it never fit in the first place.
Because before the Shavira.
Right, before the Shavira. That the air was not nechaz. Nechaz means caught. Like the flame did not catch in the container. So the question comes back. In the other place, in the Likutei Torah, other places it explains that the air did manifest in the container. So when the container shattered, something remained from the sparks. But here we're talking that they didn't catch in the first place. So how do we understand sparks that never caught? In other words, you have containers. They were waiting for energy. The energy never met. Which I have to also understand. Why didn't they meet? You could say they did meet, but there was too much yeshes. But bottom line is they didn't meet yet. So then as the containers shatter, so where are their sparks? Now, of course, we have to understand how do they shatter if the energy never met them? What caused them to shatter? But bottom line, he's developing the idea. So let's continue. I'm not, I don't want to jump the gun here. So we have to understand how does this work? What the Indian of this is That there's something about the yesh, is that there's something, even if the yesh, the energy does not go into the container, there's still, the air itself has yeshes on its own. Because the erev, the distortion here was not just on the keli level. Also the air on its own, even before touching the container, was already not in the right mindset, so to speak. It was going too much into yeshes. You know, as we're speaking, if you remember, I'm using the example with the drowning example. It's true when the drowning victim is the one that schleps down the lifeguard. But in this thing, the lifeguard also, his intention is not completely pure.
He has to worry about himself.
I mean, I can't, in the marshal, it doesn't really work because he's coming to save him. But it would be like a teacher who's caught up, let's say, too much with himself. Well, this is what happens. What we spoke about yesterday, the psychological model, what's one of the reasons of enablers? Why would somebody allow themselves to get trapped by a dysfunctional person and become their so-called? Is because they themselves think they're a savior sometimes. They become arrogant. They think, I could save the situation. I won't get trapped. Like Adam, that type of, or the nefilim. The sense is, I'm invulnerable. And when you're lacking that complete humility, it's coming from Kedusha. You're still, the interest is to help. But since there's yeshes already, it's already room. Like I think maybe that's why the noise by Matan Torah. The noise of Matan Torah per se is Kedusha. But maybe, the point is, why by Yom Kippur is it quiet? Because sometimes noise, we understand it's a good kavanah, but it has a little too much.
Yeshes.
Yeah. I mean, yesh is subtly.
Yeah, of course.
It's like too much. So Yom Kippur teaches us, look, this time walk quietly. Don't make such a noise. Noise leaves room for problems. So even the erev, so that's what he's saying here. So that's in other words, the problem of Tohu is not just the containers. The erev itself, in this third type of dysfunctionality, is too much yesh. It's true, by the way. Very often, when you find this in the therapy of trying to find, let's say, a person who's, let's say, a spouse is addicted to something, or a spouse is very abusive, and the other spouse is, so to speak, enabling, by like minimizing, by giving too much love, by not being accountable. Often the other spouse, it's not always coming from weakness. The other spouse thinks we can do it. I'm powerful enough. And then that overconfidence ends up being a disaster. Because you have to come to learn 1 second. When you really love someone, you think love can conquer all. That type of thing. And you have to realize that you need sometimes that humility. Just using it as an example, how the air itself is setting up the stage is being set even by the air too. Let's put it this way: if only the container was dysfunctional and the air was fine, so we'd still have a problem. But it would be more like problem one and that's dysfunctional, where the container is not a container for the energy, but the energy is not being contaminated. The energy is just not going there. That would be like that. But okay, so he says, that the erevs are extending, are transmitting in a form of yesh b'yeser, overabundant, excessive yesh. Like I explained in a previous chapter, that always, its nature is ayin. It always wants to go into its source. The question is, does it have the second element? In tikkun, the air doesn't just have ayin, it also has hanachas atzmuseh. It's also able to set itself aside so it doesn't get consumed with its own desire to enter the source. When Nadav and Avihu went into the Mishkan, the problem was, as we know, there was no problem with their intention. The Erev Chaim says it came from abundant love, intensity. What does it say there? Is dveikus, ecstasy. It was a form of high ecstasy. The problem was, why? Because they got excited. The first day the Mishkan is set up, they see the Shekhinah is resting there. We want it. So their ayin worked against them because there was too much. You wanted it too much. They should have had the type of presence of mind to say, something, let me go in humbly. Let me stop. Let me pause. Because it was their kedusha that became their yesh. So not that God forbid we say they're even higher than Moshe and Aaron. So you're not talking here about klipa. You're not talking about they suddenly become arrogant people and do whatever they want. But their kedusha became too much. They felt it too much. It's too much of you there. It's like when Hashem says to Moshe, you can't see me and live. If there's you there, you're not going to be able to see me. Then it's you, it's not me. And here the bittul. That's like two elements of ayin. So the another Rabbi had the first element of ayin, wanting to be encompassed in the source, submerged in the source. But the second element of putting yourself aside was lacking.
So that's the yeshuv that you need after the ratzon.
Yeah, or a sense that you need. Yeah, exactly. Or the shuv that's already in the ratzon, so the ratzon shouldn't be complete kleis hanefesh. Like we talk about Rabbi Akiva's and the other three. Mm-hmm. He went in the right way, so he came out the right way. The shalom. They didn't go in the right way. They went in a little too eager, so they got hurt by it. Okay, so so now the energy is too much yesh, and now when the container doesn't have any bitl hayesh at all, that already was that became toxic. So let's put it this way. Let's go the other way around. If the air was too much yesh, but the container was what had bitl hayesh, you also wouldn't have disaster. Because the container at least is going out of its own yesh. So you don't have a clash of two yesh. The air is filled with itself. The keli doesn't have any sublimation. So let's say, for argument's sake, in the lifeguard example, the lifeguard's going with his own, he's invulnerable, he can do whatever he likes, But if the drowning victim has presence of mind, and he does reach out to him, so even if the lifeguard went with the wrong intention, but there's a container is somewhat receptive, they won't drown. The problem here is now you have the worst of both scenarios. The air's attitude is too overconfident, so to speak. The container doesn't have any receptivity, so you have yourself a disaster in your hands. So in other words, each one would not have been complete yesh. It would have been salvageable. That's the problem. So now they come together because cause them to fall in the lowest level, in a very, very low level. The hein hanikra nefilim, and this is what's called a nefilim. This combination, nefilim, that means it fell. Hema hagibedim migvuras alyenis, they're all powerful people, all powerful entities, from the highest gvuras alyenis, from the highest levels of intensity, of gvura, of severity. Giberim, like it's similar to what it says the Meraglim. They saw them as being, how would you translate Giberim? All powerful, what do they say these? Like weightlifters, what is it? Not weightlifters, Giberim. Strong men. Begvuras alyenis, the ban, the Tohu. Their strength comes from the strength of the highest strength, the supernal strength of ban of Tohu. Remember, ban is behema. Behema is always stronger than Adam. Rav Tfu is B'Kayach Sheher. Asher Me'elim Anshe Hashem. That comes from the world of Anshe Hashem, the men of name. Meaning, the men of distinction. They have a name, their personalities. Filled with themselves, basically. Does it say Anshe Shem in Bereshis by the nefilim, or does it say Anshe Shem by the Deir HaFloga, by the Tower of Babel? I have to look it up. It's interesting. So now he adds another thing in the parentheses, ban v'rapach b'gematria Hashem. Ban and rapach, eres and kalim, there you go. That's creates the disaster. Ban is 52, rapach is 288. Together they add up to 340. So that's Anshe Shem. In other words, Anshe Shem name is made up of ban and rapach. The ban and the sparks, the pach are the sparks. The dugma lezeh hainu kamein neshamas hagvois. Now he's giving an example for this. The example for this is hainu kamein neshamas hagvois, like the high, very lofty and very sublime, very high in the souls. Shenaflu lamata begufim gasim ma'id, that fell down below in very thick and Vergrept, and very thick and coarse and gross bodies. Like those azeponim are chutzpahdik people. People audacious people. The expression used, azponim, is interesting. It says the face is a face of defiance. Because that's the expression. Azeponim literally means a face, a defiant face. Az is also from Az is an animal. It's a goat. Like defiant.
Also considered as bold, no?
Bold, yeah. But it's chutzpah. Azeponim is not a compliment. Azeponim means a person, people of chutzpah, people of nerve, of audacity. Hanikra tkifa dara. The kif is takif, the intense ones of the generation. It's not a compliment. It's talking about people who are the arrogant people of a generation. It's kifa dara. Like the people who rebelled against Moshe Rabbeinu, that type of state of mind. Shalibam kosha ke'evan. Their hearts are hard like stone. V'lo yichna levavei l'Hashem klal b'shum davar. And they do not submit. They're not submissive. They don't submit their hearts. I say yichna. Hachna would be also, they don't bend their hearts, but basically they don't submit their hearts to God at all. B'shum davar, in anything. Basically arrogant individuals, but powerful souls. But they become complete, like you said, gufim gasim me'ed. Liyeshe betachlis hagasis va'apirid va'yeshes. They don't have any of this submissiveness because they are betachlis hagasis, the ultimate grossness and coarseness, va'apirid and separation, va'yeshes and ego. Because their root is from the intense and powerful energies of Tohu. Dafke. In other words, the energy is coming specifically, explicitly, from the very powerful and intense energies of Tohu. So when they fall below, because they're so intense, when they fall intensely. Like the greater they are, the more greater they fall. The more noise they make. So when they fall into the lowest level of the ultimate Ra. Nimrod, Gibur Tzayid. Like Nimrod, the king, the time of Avram Avinu, he was a Gibur Tzayid. He was a very powerful hunter. But it became trapped, and he fell into all kinds of things that were not appropriate. V'heim bnei Elikim, these are the children of God. These are like those angels, the nefilim. Sheyardu v'nofel lamata. He calls them bnei Elikim. Elikim is Gvura, of course. Bnei Elikim. That descended and fell below. Shenim shacher gamhu bara gamar alidei yeshus hakeli. That the energy also now has descended into ultimate evil through the yeshus of the container. So it's a combination. The energy may be starting with kedusha, but it's too intense and too much feeling its own intensity. It's preoccupied with its own intensity, which is what the malachim were lamada. They said, look at these people. They thought they were overconfident, so God threw them down. And now you combine it with a keli that has no bittul, and you get yourself a yurid in the ra. This is the ultimate antithesis, the diametric opposite of what we spoke earlier. The refinement of the body of Chaooch and Eliyahu. Chaooch and Eliyahu, we spoke the opposite, the second level of that may be imbalanced, where the container is too porous and too bottled to the earth. Chaooch and Eliyahu happens to be kedusha because it's also part of tikkun. But it was an example of where you have a scenario. But this is the exact opposite. Here's the opposite has happened. The air has become completely trapped by the container. There, the container became completely sublimated to the air. So that's the contrast. He's referring to Tanya now, Perek Yud. And in this regard, there's a difference between Rishayim Gemurim, like we say, Rosh V'Ralei. The ultimate Rishayim going to complete wicked people, She'esim Tshuva Leprakim, I'm sorry, being Shayim Gemurim, completely Shayim, but they're not Rosh Hashanah. She'esim Tshuva leprakim. They will do Tshuva from time to time. La'oisen she'einu nesim Tshuva le'elam. To those wicked Shayim that never do Tshuva at all, v'hu inyan Rosh V'tevle v'Rosh V'rale, which is the difference between the Rosh V'tevle and Rosh V'rale, like he speaks in Tanya, Perek Yud Aleph, I'm sorry. Perek Yud Aleph, he says the Rosh V'tevle means V'tevle. He still has Tev, but the Tev is subjugated to selfishness. Rosh V'rale, he said, and you say, what do they say? L'shem Elohim Charotas is referring to most of us. They have regrets, and they will do tshuva from time to time. But Rosh Raloi means the Ra has so consumed him that there's no room even for him having regrets. At the end of the Perek Aleph there. Okay, so he finished now the third level of dysfunctionality, essentially concluding here that the Rosh Raloi is another example of it. That doesn't mean there's no kedusha there. On the contrary, this Rosh Raloi may have very powerful energy, but it's become so consumed by the negative that there's no opening. There's an expression not here, but in the Rebbe brings it, that something that the Nitzut says, the sparks of kedusha that go into Shalosh Klippos Atmeis, why can't you elevate them? They also have sparks, because it comes like Chaticha Nasa Nevela. It would be like a kosher piece of meat that fell into a pot of non-kosher. So it's, even though it's still kosher fundamentally, but it's now completely consumed, and it becomes itself. So the spark the light becomes, it's like a black hole. But the black hole has swallowed up all the light. Now the only way you can redeem that is through breaking it. By breaking the klippa, you redeem the light. And the Rebbe explains, Chassidus explains, that you redeem the light. The container you break. But the light you can redeem, but only after the fact. You can't, God forbid, go there initially. After the fact, a person who's done something wrong, like it says in the Gemara, that the pillows that she suggested to him, that Issa later became suggested Heter. There was the story with one of the, I don't know who was, the Gemara, he went to a harlot, to a prostitute. So later they married. So it says that the pillows that she suggested in Isra now became pillows suggested that. In other words, the pillow could be transformed once it's a kedusha, but you have to throw out and break the clip. So this concludes dysfunctional level 3. Now we go to level 4. You still with us?
It's hard to leave.
Yeah. You want to ask anything? I'll just move on. What? He doesn't use it. I don't like to throw in examples that are not used because it could be there's a reason he's not mentioning Korach. Korach is not necessarily Ra Gomer. Korach rebelled. He had his intentions. And, I wouldn't necessarily put Korach in this category. You have an example of a powerful person who misuses his power is an example. But anyway, does it help you if it's Korach? How does it help you understand if it's Korach? We have here used Korach. I don't think Korach goes in the same breath. That the Shpol Zayda said of Helika Zayda Korach, our holy grandfather Korach. You can't say that about nefilim and Rosh V'rale and erev Rav. Erev Rav and nefilim and the examples he gives there and the Rosh V'rale and these neshamas that go into gas and b'yeser, I think is a lower level than that. But any abuse of power, by the way, is this. Anyone in a very powerful position uses the erev. So the keli ends up using the erev and becomes trapped in a very negative way. So let's go to number 4. Madrega al adalat. And the fourth final level of dysfunctionality or imbalance, Kusha'eru b'chinas ma'ayin liyesh. I just want to clarify, he's going to clarify it here specifically, that the first 3 are in the first level of the erev and keli preparing to meet, where they tolerate each other. The fourth problem is once they meet. So let's just, one second, let me just sum up one thing. So that's how we understand the tzutze eir. So the eir are not complete, the eir here, Tohu is not completely innocent. That's why you have sparks. The sparks are the remaining, like so-called, because of the yeshes, they also are part of, they didn't get shattered, the containers get shattered, but the energies also don't just go back and make believe like nothing happened. They're also part of the problem at the end of the day. So the result, they have to also be elevated. That's why they're sparks. So it's interesting. So in the Kutta Torah, the explanation is because the air manifests in the container. And here the Rebbe Rashab is Machadish, and not only the air that's inside the container, but even the air before it enters the container also is a form of sparks as a result of its yeshes. It's interesting. I guess that's the two different levels of scholars. Okay, so the fourth level goes like this. Sha'eru b'chinas ma'ayin liyesh. Now again, these are all formulas. These are all, let's call it distorted algorithms. So here, the last one, it's important to look at the words. The last one was, the definition was, Sha'eru b'chinas ma'ayin liyesh b'yeser, and akeli ein bo b'chinas bitla yesh kla. I mean, that's like the description of it. And now it goes like this. Ha'eru b'chinas ma'ayin liyesh, not b'yeser. The is ma'ayin liyesh, okay, which is necessary. We know that's important here. V'akeli b'chinas bitla yesh la'ayin. And that again is already distinction. The keli is bitla yesh la'ayin. It has a sublimation going on. Ukanal, b'china nechena, ukanal b'meziga nechena. Like we learned earlier, that when the right combination, when the right formula is there, the correct match, correct, the perfect, the correct meziga, we kept saying combination, formula, whatever it is. So in the fourth level,
everything is right.
well, so no, but then he's going to say in that you'll see in a second. So in the fourth level, you have the erev is going in ayin yesh, akel is yesh la'ayin. Like we spoke earlier, that's the right the right measure. That's considered to be the appropriate hischabros, the fusion, the union, viscalos, and interconnectivity of energy and container. He's going to explain that it's not b'meziga nechena now. So in the right formula, it's good. But when it's not properly combined, so we have now a situation. It's not like the first three. Here they are in the they are both doing what they should be doing. The air is going more ayin yesh. The container is going for yesh to ayin. But however, when it's not in the proper mix, it cannot be sustained. So he's now explaining in parentheses what he's referring to. What we discussed earlier in the three different types of imbalances of dysfunctionality. That's in the energies in the containers, how they are on their own before they meet. In those three, there was one option was that the air was fundamentally too much ayin. That's the option. That was dysfunctional number one, or too much yesh, overabundant, excessive yesh, which was option number three. And the same thing with the container on its own. That it was too much yesh and does not be encompassed in the air, which is 1 and 3. Or it's too overabundant and excessive ayin that it completely disappears, completely gets annihilated and consumed. Option 2. That's how they are on their own. That the dysfunctionality is in the first stage of their hiskalos, when in the preparatory stage, before they even meet. So you have these three possibilities. The air could be either too much ayin or too much yesh, or the keli could be too much ayin or too much yesh. And those are the three different configurations, the three different dysfunctionalities. The first one, the air is too much ayin and the keli is too much yesh. And the second one, the air is ayin and the keli is too much ayin. And the third one is the air is too much yesh and the keli remains a yesh. Those are the three possibilities, and all of them are problems, with the third being, of course, the worst. But now, this fourth category of dysfunctionality, here we're already talking when they meet, and they're exchanging their functions. Remember, we spoke with the ayin, where they exchange their functions. The keli begins to assume more of a earth property by being more sublime, like a proper wick. The flame and the fire and the energy is becoming more keli-like in a certain element by ready to manifest within. as he said, it recognizes the need to enter the container. So they're exchanging, like he said, that was necessary for the union, the healthy fusion, tikkun of air and keli. You need this type of exchange of function. What does this mean in a healthy way? That the energy assumes the function of the container, that the energy assumes the function of the container where it goes from the ayin, from complete sublime and substanceless to something more substance-like. And the container assumes the function of energy, to go from the yesh, from its so-called itness and identity, to being a little more sublime. But in the fourth one, that's happening. They're both doing the right thing, but it's not the proper formula. It's not, the mix is not the perfect formula. The combination is not good. That's the problem in number 4. So number 3, the problem is on their own, all the different scenarios. And this one, the problem is on number 4. And now he's going to explain what it is. Of course, you have to explain this parentheses, because if not, it starts sounding like number 4 is a variation of the first 3. So he explains that what's number 4? That the keli is too much. It's excessive. Bitla hayesh. It's a little too much bitla hayesh. And it's not a container to receive the air completely. Ube'emes, in the parentheses he adds, Ube'emes, in truth, we'll explain it tomorrow. Don't worry. You'll get the proper explanation. You won't lose it. Now he's adding like this. Okay. So we hear that the container is an excessive bitla yesh, and he's adding that this really is coming from the yeshes of the container. The fact that it's going to become too much ayin is really an expression of yeshes. He says, because the bitl of the container is really in a level of yesh, because it's not listening to what God wants. It's not following it's not following the higher purpose. In other words, the deeper bitl here is similar to what he said about the air, when the air doesn't do what it has to do. Like we will explain later in the union of davening, when it's excessive over the learning and study and working, exerting yourself in Torah. There's an imbalance. So he's saying here, okay, so that's one scenario. Remember, we spoke in the fourth dysfunctionality, the 2 types of scenarios. The keli can be too much bittul, from yesh to ayin, and the air can be too much ayin to yesh. So that's one scenario. He said that earlier. He said that's possible. The fourth one, he said there's 2. The fourth one is possible too. Or the other way around in this fourth dysfunctionality is that the energy is excessively going from ayin to yesh. And it's not, and no longer at all, a radiating energy. It's become too much contained, too concealed and too contained in the container. It's interesting, I'm just comparing at the end of chapter 296. He also defined the 2 possibilities within the 4th level of dysfunctionality, and he said that one way, bitl hayesh la'ayin ba'keli b'yesem mikviyam shochem ayin liyesh. Too much bitl, and it's not commensurate to the bitl of the energy to the container, which is not according to the amitis hakavana, the purpose, the higher purpose, the true purpose. And the second possibility is in ein bitl hayesh akil l'fiyam shachas ayin, that the container is not bottle enough.
You're going to build on the cable.
And that causes the energy to be more yesh than it should be, and not radiate. It's just interesting. He just added there, he blamed it more, a little more on the container. Here he's just saying the same scenario, but it doesn't mention here the container being culprit. So I don't know if that's something we can emphasize, because you can just say he's relying on what he said earlier, or maybe there's a third scenario. In the second scenario itself, there may be two scenarios. One where the energy itself is just becoming more yesh than it should be. In other words, similar to this functional number 3, and on its own. Or is because the container is not being bottled enough, so therefore the energy reacts that way.
Yeah,
It's possible you can say both ways. I'm sorry.
That's not my kind of understanding was that the position of the kli affects the order. So automatically, when talking about what happens, the stance of kli takes, it's you're always including what the reaction in the order.
Yeah, but we see scenarios here where the erev on its own is causing problems.
Yeah.
It's not always the kli. The kli may be the clincher, but it's all beginning. The dysfunctional level number 3, the erev itself was also a certain attitude.
Too much yesh.
Or we have the dysfunctional number 2,
The kli was too
or
much.
the number 1 rather, where the erev is
Ayin.
mortgage.
Yesh, ayin.
Yeah, where it's completely mortgage, where it's into itself, and therefore it causes the keli to be there. There was the other way around. The number 2,
In number 1.
rather, the erev,
both-
it's being involved in its own thing causes the container to be involved in its own thing. And I know cause and effect is a little complicated here because it could go either way, really. And remember he said also earlier, what happens first? Does the container first emerge in Tohu, or does the energy first from Eitz Chaim?
Yeah.
So, because there he asked that question. He says in chapter 297, he says, because the energy was too much into itself, that's why Akena Keli also is yesh b'yesir. And then he says, but it says in Eitz Chaim that the containers emerged first. And he answered that even, and that the container causes the energy this way. Nevertheless, you have to say the containers in Tohu also come through the energy. You have to say probably that it could be both possibilities. And I'm just emphasizing the different nuances. That's really what I'm saying here. Okay, so here we go. In a minute, the kol zehu b'madregas haTohu. All these 4 dysfunctionalities, and he's finished them now, are all on the level of Tohu. Shakolu b'chinas yesh umurgush, where everything there is in a state of yesh. It's intense, but it's a state of sensing self, umurgush, and sensation. Al-kain ein hagbola umidu shir, and that's why there's no tempering. There's no parameters. There's no limits. Umida, and measurement, and shear, and another form of measurement parameters. Hein ba'ayin, both in the ayin, there's a lack of temperament and seasoning. The hein ba'yesh, and both in the ayin and in the yesh. Both the sublime elements of the erev and the coarse elements of the yesh are not the proper measure, are not tempered, are not seasoned. And the same thing also from as they, both in the ayin and yesh on its own, and also as they transform and assume the properties of the other. From the ayin liyesh of the erev, or yesh la'ayin of the keli, that too is not properly tempered and seasoned. So wherever you twist, whether it's on their own or how they reach to each other, there's an imbalance going on. That means then the ayin, the bittul, there's no limit, there's no measurement. And it could be in a state of complete kiloin, a complete annihilation, the siluk, and removal, disappearance. And also the yesh can be in a state of there's no limits, no measurement, and to the point it becomes complete yesh. So there's no breaks, essentially. It's a wild world. It's a chaotic world where energies and containers are flying all over the place, and ayin bittul is too excessive, yesh is too excessive. When they meet, they're too excessive. However you twist and turn it, it's an excessive world. So there's a lot of power there, but it's a chaotic universe. And also what the fact that it goes from ayin to yesh, from yesh to ayin, as they move toward each other. It doesn't have within it at all a proper measured balance, proper formula and combination. And it all comes because of their sensing themselves, sensing their power. As I said, the power of the teacher, the power of the student, and just instead of hanachas atzmusei, where you put yourself aside, and the higher purpose is running the show. It would be, God forbid, in a disease where all the organs in the body all suddenly are full blown, and they no longer recognize anyone else except themselves. Well, that's why it's called the shattering of the containers. And the repair of these four different dysfunctionalities, where they shema. That comes back to the shema that he spoke about so long ago, and so me memorim back and throughout this whole flow. The shema, ma is bittul, not ban. This is the level of bittul, of suspending yourself. Setting yourself aside, putting yourself aside. Not to be like your inherent nature. And not according to your essential desire. But that it should be aligned to the higher purpose. So in other words, in the interface that the Ayin Beis is so involved, is so driven to determine, to establish the interface between the two, between yesh and ayin, between the divine and the world, and the creation. So though every step in the interface, there's steps how they fit into each other, like a glove, like a hand inside a glove, but there's one critical element that everybody needs, a little bittle. They have to put themselves aside, or else you're not going to have a meeting point. In other words, the keli and erev fit each other, and they could fit perfectly. There can be total fusion, but you need shema. You need to throw into the formula a little ma. So in the discussion we spoke about mediation. You can get them to tolerate each other. You can get them to feel how they need each other, but they both have to have bittul. That first allows them to tolerate each other, and so on. Mm-hmm. If you just let everybody follow their own recourse, left to their own recourse, you're going to have everyone's into themselves. And the erev will do what it has to do, the kelim. So you need a captain here. You need a coordinating force, which is the shema that sets the stage for an environment of communication. And then comes the interface begins to work. So we need both. If you just have bittul, you still don't have a communication. Bittul is not going to, for example, connect atzmos to the world without all the erev and kelim and all the levels. They're so infinitely apart. So you need bittul plus the different interactions, the different interconnectivities, the different stages of the interface mixing together. That's the point here. And I'm going to read quickly to the end of this. So we just finish this mimer. And then we're done with that. So now he concludes the mimer back to the beginning. He's answering the questions if you're called sheftim b'sheftim. According to the above, we'll understand the verse for which he began this discourse. That judges and law enforcers you shall appoint, you shall place. So he asked all those questions earlier. The Shiftecha and Tzaddik B'Tzaddik and all the different questions, he's going to answer them. Now it says in the book, Ma'er is a Kabbalistic work, very fundamental Kabbalistic work, which is like an encyclopedia of terms from Meir Papirash, is the Kabbalist, Meir Papirash. He's from the students of the Arizal. It's a very fundamental. Chassidus brings it a lot. It's an encyclopedic work where he goes through Aleph Beis, like Oyer, Bina, whatever terms, and just describes their spiritual, their level. No explanation much. Okay, and has a commentary on the side as well that helps. So it says in erev the shefet hu b'tiferes. So if you want to know like a level of something, what's a shefet? What's a shater? Or this, it gives you just the level where it is. So it says shefet hu b'tiferes. Shefet is in the level of tiferes. Tiferes hu is kalvus. Because tiferes is interconnectivity. Tiferes is the middle path, and it connects chesed and gvura. V'zeu idea hamishpat. Through judgment, through a case, through define mishpat, not judgment. It's really, through the clarity that comes through
litigation.
Litigation, not necessarily litigation. I'd be a mishpat through a review, I guess, a legal review of in a legal case. That's the mishpat. So when two people come to a rav, or they come to a judge, what they want to have is the judge sifts through all their arguments and comes to a point of clarity that things should be the right balance and the right appropriate, that not one person wins or dominates or is just controlling, but justice is done. Justice is a form of iskalos. Good justice. So Torah justice is taking, put it this way, different conflicting or differing interests and finding a place where they meet. I'm talking about true justice. Because that's mishpat. Mishpat is a form of limitation, a form of boundaries. That everything should be in its place. You take away law and order, so it's called the alangvar. Whoever is more powerful is going to win. The more abusive one. Mishpat is meant to create order in the land. Law and order. Everything should be in its place. Those that deserve what they deserve. Don't grab what you don't deserve, what you don't own. You have a conflict between neighbors. You have a conflict between partners. So you find a balanced place where everything is in its place. Where there's no law and order, it's chaos. In other words, in Tohu, there's no mishpat, basically. Mm-hmm. There's no one there stating rules. Everyone's just doing what they want. It's a free-for-all. Mm-hmm. This level of mishpat, shefet, is the midah v'shir. It's like the measuring rod that measures and creates parameters b'chala eses spheres in all the 10 spheres, b'chinas erev v'kelim. And the level of containers, energies and containers, b'chinas ma'ayin liyesh or miyesh la'ayin. The level of ayin liyesh, so the goes from the ayin, from its sublime state to a state of identity, and miyesh la'ayin, the state of itness of the keli, to the state of sublime. Shir b'midah ba'efesh, that should be measured, ba'efesh shir yishashvus ha'er ba'keli, in a way that there should be a peaceful coexistence, but more than yishashvus, an integration, internalization, a peaceful settling in of the energy into the container, tailored, and then there should be a divine revelation in the world. The tachas hakavana b'eshes spheres that sheyagili elikus. The ultimate purpose of the 10 spheres of Atzilus is for there be divine relation in the world. We're talking about the interface. For that to take place, the container has to be prepared, has to be in a state of preparation, a preparatory state to receive and contain the energy. And the energy has to have a proper measure of going away from its sublime form to be prepared and ready to enter into the container. Like I spoke many times, like different examples. A teacher whose flow of ideas is going so quickly, the energy is so powerful, the students can't contain it. You have to put it into words, into containers. The energy has to also fit into the containers. And the containers, of course, have to be receptive to the energy. Everything in life is this combination. When you write, the letters on the page are the containers, but they're conveying an idea. You don't want to go too fast. You don't want to go too slow. You want to have the perfect. You want to have enough there to elevate the student, but not too much to overwhelm him, and not too little where he doesn't have to even grow. And just, so you need a constant tug and pull, a constant tension and resolution of climbing, which requires this perfect measure. So that's what mishpat does, teferes. It's the measuring. And through this, there'll be the containment, the internalization and integration of the energy in the container, and also the gilei and the revelation of the energy, which is, there's two elements are necessary. Their fusion, and that energy should radiate, should reveal divine. Or else you don't want to just be together and everything is at peace. You want also you want a flow of information to continue in. So when a teacher student, you want the student to continue growing and the teacher continuing transmitting more and more as the containers expand to contain more of the divine flow and energy. And that's the meaning of the verse, that you shall appoint shaftim in all your gates, meaning in all your spheres. Now in the Zohar he asks, asks on the verse, it says, that in their gates the owner is known. The Zohar asks, how is he known? That the owner is God. The Mashakasu Neide B'Sha'arim Kai Al Mashakasu Keidim Leze Eishes Chaya. Now this is the pasuk of Eishes Chaya. Neide B'Sha'arim is talking about what it says earlier, Eishes Chaya. That who should know God? Who are the gates? It goes on, but it says Eishes Chaya. Miyimtza. And B'chinas Malchus Ubayla Hu HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Eishes Chaya is referring to the wife of so-called HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the level of Malchus. And Baila, her husband, is Kuchabrichu, is the divine. It's like Kuchabrichu v'Shechina, the two divine levels, the masculine and feminine dimensions in the divine. So the Zohar is asking, how is he known? Baila is referring to the divine. Sharim goes on Malchus, Eishes Chaya. So how could he be known? How could the Baila, the owner, God, be known by Malchus, by Eishes Chaya? After all, the infinite divine light is sasum, is concealed and hidden. And the Zohar answers, Ela di'iu is yadav is dabit b'chol chacham v'chacham l'fum shir delay. B'chol chad v'chad l'fum shir delay. I said chacham v'chacham. I don't know why I said that. Yeah. So Ela di'iu is yadav, he is known, v'zdabik, and is cleaved to, b'chol chad v'chad l'fum shir delay. Each individual according to his measure. L'fum ad m'shayir b'libay. According to what he's able to be Messiah, conceive of, be able to imagine in his heart. What does this mean? So he says, V'hainu, this means, through an individual's contemplation and meditation on the divine, and his soul's cleaving and yearning and connecting to God, to the divine, to godliness, through an awakening of love and awe, that's how he knows. So now he's explaining with the Zohar, he's going to explain Sheftim b'chol sharecha. Remember, this means, this is how the gates come to know, because every gate, according to its measure of contemplation and connection, that's how it ends up knowing, the owner in the gates. So this is what it says, Sheftim tit l'chol sharecha, you shall place judges in all your gates. So that's the Zohar, because the Zohar says midah v'shir. Everyone, according to their measure, is able to relate, and that's what it means. That in your gates you shall place measure, basically, and that's how you get to know. And this means that the contemplation and the awakening of love and awe should be measured according to a logical, systematic, tam v'das means a rational measure, not just wild. That's sheftim. Now what's sheftim? What are the law enforcers? The same erev. What is shaitim, the law enforcers? So it says in Meireh, shaitim b'chinas ha-malchus. Shaitim is malchus. Sheftim is teferes, shaitim is malchus. For who liyesh shviris hachum liyesh shizal de haradiyah v'hakar. Malchus refers to, like, why is it a law enforcer? Because it's the breaking of the gross desires, the grossness of this world, and that takes place through force. Hadadia v'akah. The dia v'akah is referring to actually spanking and hitting. Now, of course, we have to qualify. We're not talking physically here. We're talking here spiritually. Is the breaking of the resistance of those that don't want to submit to the shefet, to the right measure. It's the humbling of. And all the gates, so it says in Shifsei Kohen on the Torah, Shein Evre Haguf. These are the faculties, the organs, Evre, of the body. Ubesefer Yetzirah Isa, and Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation, it says, V'sha'arim b'nefesh v'hein zayin sha'arim, that the gates in the soul are 7 gates. Beis Einayim, 2 eyes. Ubeis Oznaim, 2 ears. Beis Nikvi Hachetim, 2 nostrils. V'apeh, and the mouth. So now, he's laid out now the map, what all this means in Ruchnis. V'hu sheyiyeh shviras achumis b'chol achushim, that this means there should be the breaking of the chumnis, of the grossness, of the coarseness, in all the chushim, in all our what do we call sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell? Our senses, yeah, in all our senses, the riyah v'shmiyah, in seeing and hearing and so on. So this is what it means. Sheftim v'sheitim, you shall place and appoint judges and law enforcers in all your gates. Gates refers to the 7 gates within the soul. And in order to do so, you need sheftim to measure properly, like he said in the Zohar, to measure and contemplate properly in order to receive Ba'ila Neida, to know God. And the law enforcers, they do the part of breaking the resistance or the discipline and the humbling of the senses, that they shouldn't follow their own temptations and their desires, but they should be channeled toward the proper place. So Sheftim measures and tells you how to do it. Sheftim enforces it. That's the Daveda here. Like we say, do not follow after your heart, and after your eyes. The Ein V'Liba trains Sisura Daveda. Because Ein V'Liba, eye and heart, are two Sisura, two so-called agents of Aveda, of sin. 2 representatives, 2 ambassadors of sin. The tzarich is eitzim ein of maras, and you have to have the closing, tightening the eyes from seeing. Sometimes you need the intensity to shut your eyes, to lock your eyes from seeing. The neged zeh yeh b'chinas riyah d'kedusha, and in its place, neged zeh means opposite of it. Instead of it, should be a riyah d'kedusha. You should look at things with holy things. This doesn't mean just locking your eyes and forever not looking. It means instead of looking at the wrong things, to look at the right things. What's the right things? Raise your eyes to heaven and see who created you. The same thing, your ears should be sealed, closed. From listening to the wrong things. And it should be Ashri Adam. Beloved is the person, Shemeeli, that listens to me. Like, be careful in what you hear. If you recall, in the previous Maimer, he spoke about Hizuru B'Nishma. That by being careful in the Nishma, you end up being able to experience the Nasa, the deeper level of Bittul. So he's connecting it to that. Hizuru B'Nishma. That's in the previous discourse, which was A. V'chein b'reach hatfila. I'm saying v'chein b'reach. So he now spoke so far about seeing and about hearing. Remember, we said the 7 gates are the eyes, the ears, the nose, and the mouth. Now he's going to the nose. V'chein bereach. And same thing with smell. I'm sorry. V'chein bereach the tefillah. And the same thing with the smell of davening. Comparing tefillah to reach. Doesn't say why, but sometimes reach is like the terus, the incense with smell. So tefillah creates a beautiful smell, like the karbonis. Reich nechayach. Tefillah are connected karbonis tiknum. The dibur de teira liyas peh. This is the final one. The fourth one is the peh. So it's the two eyes, the two ears, the two nostrils, and now the seventh shah, the seventh gate, is the speaking, the dibur de teira, to speak with teira. Liyas peh medaber b'teira v'tefillah. I use this peh also for davening. So b'chereg de tefillah, the dibur de teira, that the mouth should speak teira and tefillah and not the wrong things. U'shelo yedaber diburim she'en tzorech liyas. That he should not speak words that should not be said. We're not only talking, not just not to talk, God forbid, forbidden things, but even meaningless things, that have no benefit, which strongly weakens and diminishes mafsid. It causes you to lose. It belittles and denigrates the soul, very much so. Very much denigrates the soul. Okay. And you need to break the chumnius. You have to break, because we all have desires. And it's very easy to fall with your eyes and your ears and your nose and your mouth into things that are inappropriate. So you need to have those shaitim that break it, that enforce it. The emre. Then he continues that that you shall appoint these judges that measure, as we said, they measure the right appropriate way that you meditate and contemplate on God and the awakening in the heart. The law enforcers that break the opposite and enforce. There shouldn't be the sha'arim, the gates in negative things, but in positive things. And what are these gates? These are gates asher Hashem Elokecha. And it says, Sheitim v'sheitim, tilab choshech, asher Hashem leis. One second. Asher Hashem leis l'choshev. Yeah, so it says that these gates is what God gave you, the shiftecha, to your tribes. He's going to explain that part now. What's Hashem Elokecha? Hu inyan erev v'kelim. This is the energies and the containers, that they should be in the proper formula and measure. Ul shiftecha. So that's the sheftim v'sheftim titin lecha v'chol sharecha asher Hashem Elokecha neisin lecha. That you should place those judges and those enforcers in all your gates. And that means Hashem Elokecha, what God gave you, which means that the eres and kelim, Hashem Elokecha, should be the proper measure. Ul shiftecha. What does that mean? Hey, Yud Beis Gvuli al Achsanim. Shiftecha goes on the 12 tribes that correspond to the 12 sides of the 12 angles of diagonals of any square. Shuiskalas Hamidus. This is so Shiftecha is referring to the interconnectivity of the emotions, because that breaks in 12 different ways that it combines, configurates. And then he continues, that's what he says, tzedek, justice, till if you shall pursue. What are the two times tzedek? Ayin Beis HaMadreg is the teira of tefillah. 2 levels of davening and learning. Of learning, of teira study, and tefillah, and prayer. Of Torah and prayer. The tefillah nikrat tzedek, Moshe Kosav, ani b'tzedek erza panecha. Tefillah, prayer is called tzedek, like it says, ani b'tzedek erza panecha. I, in tzedek, I'm going to erza, will see your face. What's tzedek there? Tefillah. Through prayer, you see God's face. We also find the teira is called tzedek. Moshe Kosav tan chulu ki kol mitzvasecha tzedek. Sanim rosecha. So you see there that all the mitzvahs are called tzedek, means all the mitzvahs of the Torah. What's the difference between the two? The tefillah he bit like and the Torah hum shachas ha'er. Now, this is very vital. Remember, he said earlier that we'll understand it later in the imbalance of tefillah and Torah. So remember, in Ayin Beis, even though both are necessary, tefillah and Torah, but tefillah generally is the kelim going out of themselves to reach the erev. Torah brings the erev into the kelim. Ayin Beis is about interface, about tislapshus, about manifestation. So Torah is a central focus in Ayin Beis. So what's the difference? He says, so tefillah is bitla hakelim. Tefillah is the suspension of the containers. The Torah and Torah draws down energy. Like we see simply, when you daven, what you're doing is emptying yourself. We said, remember, the prayer is about emptying yourself and allowing something in. Torah, you're learning and you're bringing, with your mind, you're bringing down the ideas, divine ideas.
Go ahead. Very good. Very good.
Kol zeh b'tzedek. And everything like this should be done with justice, tzedek. U'meisharim, tzedek u'meisharim, and with straightness. She'bitla klei b'midah v'shir, that the container should be suspended in a measured way, in order for it to be in a way that it can remain a container. And then the transmission of the energy should be in a way that it should radiate. So he's saying that all this, both Torah and Tefillah. Tefillah is the bitla hakelim, suspension of the containers, and Torah is the transmission of air. They should be b'tzedek u'meisharim. They should be done b'tzedek u'meisharim, meaning it should be done with a proper measurement of the container being a proper container, and the energy should be a radiating energy. And then he continues, "V'emer l'man tiyeh v'yirashta," in order l'man tichye v'yirashta, in order for you to live and to inherit the land. What is that relevant here? The relevance, Yerusha Sa'aretz hu bitla hakelim. The inheriting of the land is the bitl, is the suspension of the containers. Hepech me'inyan ba'aris batalis. Remember, he said earlier that yesh lemer, that when he explained the end of chapter Reish Tzadik Ches, he said that Shviras HaKelim is like yesh lemer, that's the thing of the land being annihilated, disappearing. He spoke the difference between the midas, where the shattering, and Malchus ends up with nothing, because Malchus doesn't have anything to receive. So he's saying now, inheriting the land is the opposite of what we find in Tohu, where the land disappears, is annihilated. Shehuin heder hametzius. At the end of chapter, as I said, at the end of the chapter 298. Inheriting the land is that the land, Malchus, receives and becomes a container to the higher energy. It's the bitl of the container, the healthy bitl, where it becomes a container for the higher energy instead of it disappearing. So Yerusha is the bitl of Kalim, containing, is the opposite of the land. Malchus disappearing as a result of the imbalance of Tohu. Lamantichia refers to, in order that you should live, is the extension of energy, of light. And deeper and deeper way, and even a deeper way, we can say the virashta that virashta, inheriting, is the suspension of the container in a form that is bitl mitzias. That assumes the higher bitl of the air. The mantichia inyan v'nichia lefanav. The mantichia is referring to v'nichia lefanav, that you shall live before him. V'hu hagili de la'asad she'yigili b'chinas atzmis himself. So in the first interpretation, the mantichia is simply a continuation of the same theme of the verse that he spoke until now, eris and kelim. But then, in a way, you could say it's repetitive. You already said that the eris come down in the kelim. That's tzedek. So he's saying a second, deeper interpretation. Yerashta is referring to the container being completely sublimated and receiving the idea that there's nothing but God, sensing its complete suspension of self. And the mantichya is a higher revelation that will come when Mashiach comes in the future, where there be the revelation of the divine, the essence of the divine light, of Atzmus Ein Sof, not light, the revelation of Atzmus Ein Sof, of the divine essence. And nevertheless, it will still be a container. So not the mantichya goes on the transmission of energy, it goes that the container will then receive Atzmus itself. Because in the future, there'll be neshamas begufim, souls within bodies. Raksha guf, yekeli lelakus. The only difference will be that the guf, the body, will be a container for the divine. Ki bittul hachumnis legamri, because then all the chumnis, all the grossness and coarseness of existence of the world will disappear. V'hu inyan v'chad charuv. The Talmud says, Shitaf Hashin Hava Alma, the world was created in 6,000 years. The 7th millennium will be Shabbos, V'chad Charuv, and there'll be one that's Charuv literally means to destroy, to annihilate. But what he's talking here is Sheyeshamim Megashmis V'yeshes, not, God forbid, annihilating the entire existence. The Gashmis and Yeshes of the world, its self-containment, its sense of its own me, Yeshes, Gashmis, that will no longer be, because it will be sublimated in its source. Nevertheless, there'll be bodies, and there'll be containers to the divine. And through this will be fulfilled the purpose of existence, that God desired there should be a dira, a home, a divine home in the lowest of worlds. Remember, I explained where the student, as the containers expand, he begins to contain energies that are far, far greater without getting annihilated. In the beginning, if you would give him too much energy, the container would burst, or be overwhelmed, or be unable to contain. But as the containers expand, the whole purpose of the interface is that there'll be a union, a joining of the divine essence and existence. But we have to go stepping stones. We have to do this baby steps. But ultimately, what he's saying here is that that's not just, that this verse is referring not just in the regular eris and kelim that take place in the regular healthy process of tikkun. This is actually referring to the ultimate purpose of it, tichya, the man tichya, and not only will you inherit, not only will the containers inherit and have bittul to mitzias, to the energy, but they'll actually reach tichya l'chilafon of tchis hamesim l'asad lavi, where the souls and bodies will fuse completely, and the containers will be a containers to the essence itself. Dira b'taktein, that in the lowest of worlds will be a dira, a home for the divine, which is the ultimate, obviously, fulfillment of the interface. The calls and all this takes place through the fact that you appoint judges and law enforcers, that there should be a measured parameters in how the combination and the formula of eris and kelim join. Shall be tamvadas, and through a work and efforts that's not beyond seichel and beyond our understanding, but in a way that is logical, that's measured. Tamvadas means in an organized and orderly and in a way that's comprehensible and logical. This is the meaning of you shall appoint judges and law enforcers in order that you should live and you should inherit. The tachlis hakavana sheyibit lakeli v'tia b'chinas clearly keli l'gir elyan. What does that mean? Because laman. Why is it in order for you to live and in order for you to inherit? Because that's the ultimate purpose. The ultimate purpose of appointing these judges and law enforcers is in order for you, for tachlis hakavana, the ultimate purpose that there should be this sublimation and the suspension of the container. The tia b'chinas keli should be a container l'gir elyan, to a higher revelation. Should be a container to a much higher revelation. And specifically, and more specifically, that there should be the bittul mitzias, that the container should experience a bittul of mitzias, not just bittul hayesh. That it should sense actually not just that a weakening of its identity, but that there's nothing but the source and the divine. And through this, there'll be the revelation in the future of a nichya lefanov, that you shall live before him. Lefanov means the atzmos, the ultimate dira b'tachtenim. Interesting, it says leman tichya v'yarashta. According to this, it should have said leman yarashta v'tichya. But he's been given, I guess tichya is the ultimate purpose. Tichya is higher than v'yarashta. Okay. And for this we need to have the judges and enforcers. The judges do the measuring. The shaitim, the enforcers, do the shviras hachumriyas, the breaking of the resistance, the breaking of the stronghold of the coarseness and grossness of existence. This is the preparation of the container, that it should be a ready container to receive. This is like the Tshuvat Atah that he discussed in Aveda in the chapter 298. Mishpat, the lower tshuva is necessary in order to get to the tshuva law. You need to have the lower tshuva. You need to have the container being prepared, like you said there. The container prepares on its own level, then it can receive the higher level that comes from the air. But all has to be penetrate also the nefesh habamis, as you said, the animal soul. And that there should be the right judgment, the right measure, the proper measure and seasoning. In the sublimation of the yesh, the itness of the container, and in the transmission and the drawing out of the energy from ayin, from more sublime to more identity. And this is tzaddik tzaddik, the two tzaddiks that you should pursue is tefillah, prayer, v'teira, and teira. And through all of this, there'll be the revelation of the essence of the divine essence. And that's the meaning of mantichya, that you shall live and you shall inherit. Kitzur. Madrega Gimel, the summary of this chapter 299, is that the third level of dysfunctionality and imbalance, that the energy is too much going from its ayin, its sublime state, to yesh, and excessively, in a bottle cloud, and the container is not at all sublimated, not at all suspended. Through this, through this, the energy becomes even more yesh, even more excessive yesh. And this is the level of the sparks of the energy, that they also fell. Not just the containers fell, but the energy fell, because the energy also had yesh. The nefilim, the azim shebedar. These are the nefilim, the fallen ones, and the azim, and the chutzpedika ones, the audacious ones of the generation, shenikra tkifa dara, that are called the strong men of the generation. And the fourth level of dysfunctionality, this is already where the container, the energy in the container, exchange their natures. And on this level, the container should not have too much over excessive bittul hayesh, more than the measure, because then it will not be a container to receive. And the energy should not go too low down into the yesh, which will cause it to not be a radiating light, an illuminating light. However, it has to be in proper measure. And with this we'll understand the verse, judges and enforcers, that The judgment is that it should be the right measure. And all the gates means the work of contemplation and love and awe. And also the bittul of the animal soul, even though he didn't mention animal nefesh habamis in this chapter, but he mentioned it in the previous chapter when Reish Tzadik Ches 298. But it's referring to also the nefesh habamis, obviously, because we're talking about the sha'arim, the gates, where the eyes and the ears should all be used, not for the opposite. So it affects the nefesh habamis, the containers. Tzedek tzedek Torah v'tefillah. Tzedek tzedek is Torah and prayer. That all this should be in the right measure. Measured mishpat should be judged and measured in the right measure and balance. And with this we conclude chapter 299 in Ayin Beis volume 1, pages 605 till 607. And this also concludes this discourse Sheftim, which, for the record, is discourse. What discourse number is it? It's discourse number 73. So this is the 73rd of 144 discourses, something like halfway through, a little more than halfway through. And this is not including the third volume that was never said. So this is verse, this is 73, discourse 73. We just finished chapter 299, and then we'll continue next, chapter 300.